I sat by the window, my tea still hot, listening to my daughter-in-law scream through the phone. Your mum's card was blocked. The whole store shamed me. She had no idea I was sitting right next to my son, hearing every word on speakerphone. She also didn't know that this afternoon, at exactly 4:30, I had lawyers and the police scheduled to arrive, and she certainly didn't know the blocked card was the trap I set 3 weeks ago. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 68 years old, and I have been a widow for 8 years, living alone in my family home here in Cedar Ridge. I was, until this very moment, attempting to enjoy a cup of Earl Grey tea. The voice shrieking from the speakerphone on my coffee table belonged to my daughter-in-law, Tessa Quinn. It was a performance of high hysteria, pitched to shatter glass. They called security, Daniel Security. Because your mother's card was blocked, the whole store was staring at me. They treated me like a criminal. My son, Daniel, who is 44 years old and old enough to know better, burst into the living room from the kitchen. His face was a blotchy, furious red. His hands balled into fists. Mum, what the hell is going on? Tessa is humiliated. Explain this right now. I did not flinch. I am past the age of flinching. I very carefully placed my teacup part of my late mother-in-law's wedding china onto its matching saucer. The delicate click of porcelain on porcelain was the only sound I made. My eyes remained fixed on the front door, waiting. On the phone. Tessa continued her aria of a victim. I was just buying a few small things, just some groceries and that new blazer at Ridge and Row. The cashier tried it 3 times. Declined. 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 Then she picked up the phone and called the store manager over. Daniel paced in front of me, running his hands through his thinning hair. She said they called a security guard. Mum. A guard. People were lining up behind her, staring. She said she's never been so embarrassed in her entire life. He asked me if the card even belonged to me. Tessa shrieked. He asked for my ID and then looked at me like I stole it. All because you couldn't be bothered to pay your bill. Daniel rounded on me, his voice low and threatening. Did you do this? Did you block the card on purpose? Why? Why would you do this to her, to me? I let the accusation hang in the air, heavy as the scent of the coming rain outside. I smelled the bergamot from my tea, a small, grounding comfort. I was about to answer him. I was about to say the first true thing I had said to him in weeks, but I didn't have to. The doorbell chimed. A clear, polite ding-dong. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the entryway. 4:30, exactly on time. Daniel looked confused, distracted by the interruption. Don't answer that. We are talking about this. It's open, I called out, my voice perfectly steady. Come in, Marcus. The heavy oak door swung open, and Marcus Hale stepped inside. He is not a large man, but his presence takes up space. He carried a worn leather briefcase and wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than Daniel's last 2 car payments. His voice was professional, crisp, and cut through the humid tension in the room like a cold knife. Eleanor, good afternoon. Officer Bennett and Officer Ruiz are right behind me, as we discussed. From the speakerphone. The sound of Tessa's manufactured sobbing did not just fade. It stopped. It was as if someone had thrown a switch, instantly silencing the audio feed. The resulting silence from the phone was louder and more terrifying than her screams had been. Daniel froze. His mouth was slightly open. He looked from my calm face to Marcus, and then past Marcus to the two uniformed police officers who were now stepping respectfully into my foyer, wiping their feet on the mat. The air in my living room turned to solid ice. Daniel didn't understand. Tessa, miles away in a shopping mall, was finally realizing that she had miscalculated, that this was not about a declined transaction. They both thought they were in control. I looked straight at my son, but in my mind, I was looking somewhere else entirely. To understand this moment, this perfect, calculated, beautiful silence, you have to go back 6 months. It all began 6 months ago, with a phone call on a Tuesday evening. It was Daniel. His voice had that strained, overly casual tone he always used when he was about to ask for something. "Hey, Mom. So, listen. Funny thing, our landlord is hiking the rent. It's ridiculous. Something like 20%. We just can't swing it right now." He paused, and I could hear the faint tapping of Tessa's nails on a keyboard in the background. "We were thinking, just temporarily, of course, maybe we could stay with you for a couple of months, just until we find a new place. 2 months. Tops. A couple of months. What is a mother to say I am? After all, a mother. The word itself is a trap, a lifetime obligation wrapped in affection. Of course. I said yes. I said it immediately, without asking the questions a smarter woman might have asked. Questions like, why, or what happened to the money you supposedly saved? But maternal love is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs your common sense. My late husband, Harold, has been gone for 8 years. This house, the one he and I built, is a 3-bedroom echo chamber of his memory. His reading glasses are still in the drawer of his nightstand. His favourite armchair still holds the faint impression of his shape. It is a house of quiet routine and cherished objects. It was, I suppose, too quiet and too comfortable. They arrived 3 days later with 6 suitcases and 4 large moving boxes. Daniel gave me a quick, distracted hug, smelling of stress and takeout coffee, before he started hauling things inside. Tessa, however, paused at the threshold. She was all polished presentation, her blonde hair perfect, her nails an aggressive, glossy red. She leaned in for that stiff, arms-out hug that is all air and shoulder bones. "This is so good of you, Mrs. Whitmore," she said, her voice smooth as new vinyl. Not Mom, not even Eleanor. Mrs. Whitmore. It was a formal, sterile address that immediately established a boundary. She was a guest, yes, but one who was setting the terms of her visit. The first week was an adjustment. The second was an invasion. Daniel was gone most of the time. He claimed his new project at the firm required him to leave before 7 in the morning and kept him at the office until well after 9 at night. This left me alone with Tessa. Tessa, who was supposedly aggressively job hunting online. From what I could see, this hunting consisted of sitting at my kitchen island with her laptop, scrolling through social media and taking endless "which friend's character are you" quizzes. My life began to shrink. My routine, the one I had cultivated so carefully since Harold's death, was chipped away, piece by piece. "Mrs. Whitmore, would you mind?" she'd ask, nodding at the television. "I'm on a video call, and the noise is just a little distracting." So, I turned down the volume on my evening news program until I could barely hear the anchors. The kitchen, my domain, became a territory of quiet critique. "Oh, goodness," she'd murmur, wiping down a counter I had just cleaned. "So much olive oil. Daniel really needs to watch his cholesterol. You know. She'd say it with a bright, concerned smile, as if she were doing me a favor by pointing out my failure to keep my own son healthy. Then she began to help. I came downstairs one morning to find the antique porcelain shepherdess Harold had bought me in 1982 moved from the mantelpiece. It was now on a side table, partially obscured by a wilting orchid she had brought with her. Just upgrading the aesthetic a little, she chirped when she saw me looking. It felt a little cluttered. Didn't you think? I did not think. I thought it was my house. I thought that was my memory. But I said nothing. I just moved the shepherdess back after she went to bed. The next morning, it was on the side table again. The real line was crossed about 3 weeks in. I was coming up the stairs after retrieving the mail and heard a noise from my bedroom. My bedroom. The one room that was, unequivocally, mine. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Tessa was standing by my dresser, her back to me. She wasn't just in the room. She was holding my silver-backed hairbrush, the one Harold gave me on our 20th anniversary. She startled, dropping it with a clatter. "Oh, Mrs. Whitmore, you scared me. What are you doing in here?" "Tessa." My voice was colder than I intended. She gave that quick, artificial laugh. "Oh, silly me. My phone was dying, and I couldn't find my charger. I thought maybe I'd left it in here last night when I came in to ask Daniel a question." She had not been in my room last night, and my phone charger was visibly plugged into the wall on the other side of the room. She smiled, a wide, polite, brilliant smile that did not, for 1 second, reach her eyes. Her eyes were not smiling. They were scanning. They moved from the antique jewelry box on my dresser to the locked filing cabinet in the corner, to the framed photos of Harold. It was the look of an appraiser. It was the look of someone measuring the value of a room, calculating the worth of a life. It was the look of someone pricing every single thing I owned. After the incident with the hairbrush, the boundaries began to dissolve, not in a flood, but in a slow, corrosive drip. Tessa's suggestions became directives. My own home started to feel like borrowed space. "You know, Mrs. Whitmore, I was reading an article," she'd begin, holding up her phone. "And it said the amount of butter you use is really not healthy for a man Daniel's age. We have to be so careful with his cholesterol." She said, "we," as if we were a team. I cooked the way Harold and I had always cooked. It was comfort. It was roasts and potatoes and real butter. Tessa, however, began to supplement my groceries. Bags of expensive organic kale and obscure grains I had never heard of started appearing in the pantry. Then came the receipts. She would leave them on the kitchen counter, highlighted. "I just picked up a few essentials," she said one evening, tapping the long strip of paper. "The things you buy are, well, they're just not the best quality, are they? If you want, I can just handle the shopping from now on, but I'll need some extra grocery money. This stuff is a bit pricier." I looked at the total. It was over $300 for what looked like birdseed and spinach. "I thought you were looking for work." "Tessa." Her smile tightened. "I am. But we still have to eat, don't we? I mean, we're saving you money by not having to eat out." She was billing me for the privilege of her presence. The true erosion, however, was psychological. She operated with a soft, insidious touch. One afternoon, while I was dusting the living room, the room she had re-aestheticized, she sighed and ran a hand along the walnut bookcase. "This is such a big house," she said, almost to herself. "So much upkeep for just one person. It's beautiful, of course. Solid bones." She turned to me, her eyes bright with a casual, predatory light. "It's good to know Daniel will have this place eventually. It's such a comfort, knowing his future is secure. You know, that it's all staying in the family." She was discussing my death as if it were a pending real estate transaction. She was mentally moving me out and moving herself in. The politeness was gone 2 weeks later. I came home from my volunteer shift at the library. The house was quiet. I assumed Tessa was out. I walked down the hall toward my study, where I keep my files. The door was closed, which was odd. I never close it. I heard a distinct click, the sound of a smartphone camera shutter. I pushed the door open without knocking. Tessa was standing by my desk, her back to me. My locked filing cabinet, the one Daniel had broken the key to years ago and I'd never bothered to fix, was open. Papers were spread across my desk blotter: bank statements, insurance policies, the deed to the house. In her hand was her phone. She was photographing them, page by page. She didn't startle this time. She simply froze, her shoulders bunching. She turned around slowly, her face pale, but her eyes hard. "What do you think you are doing?" My voice was shaking, but not from fear. It was pure, cold rage. I was looking for a stamp." She lied, her voice weak. "In my bank statements. In my private insurance file. Get out of my study. Tessa. Now." She fled, pushing past me. That night, I waited for Daniel. When he finally came home, smelling of exhaustion and microwave dinners, I told him exactly what I had seen. His reaction broke something in me that Harold's death never touched. "Mum? Are you serious?" He rubbed his face, avoiding my eyes. "You were spying on her. She was probably just looking for an envelope. My God. She was photographing my bank statements. Daniel? My policies? Why would she do that? That makes no sense." He shook his head, looking at me not as a son, but as a warden. "You know, Mum, you've been alone for a long time. It's understandable. You get suspicious. You're lonely. But Tessa is your family now. You can't just accuse her of stealing." He called me suspicious. He called me lonely. He did not call her a liar. He made me the problem. He chose his wife, who he had known for 3 years, over me, who had known him for 44. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Harold was alive. I went into the study, found the spare key, and I locked the top drawer of my desk. It was a small, almost pathetic gesture, but it was a start. The next morning, I told them I was hiring a new cleaning service to come in twice a week, as the house was too much for me. Tessa beamed, no doubt pleased to be relieved of the minor chore of rinsing her own dishes. "I'm having a small security camera installed in the living room," I added casually. "Just to make sure they don't, pocket the silver." Tessa agreed it was a sensible idea. I did install a camera, but it was not in the living room. It was a tiny, wireless device, no bigger than a quarter, and I nestled it on my bedroom bookshelf, perfectly aimed at my antique jewelry safe, the one Harold had installed behind a painting of the Oregon coast. I did not have to wait long. 3 days. I watched the footage on my tablet, sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot. The video was silent, which made it worse. Tessa entered my room, closing the door softly behind her. She listened for a full minute. Then she moved with a chilling efficiency. She didn't wonder. She went straight to my dresser, checking under my sweaters. She went to my nightstand, pulling out the drawer. She checked under the mattress. Finally, she walked to the painting of the coast. She lifted it. She studied the small combination safe. She ran her painted fingernails over the dial, trying to turn it. She pulled on the handle. She took out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and examined the hinges. I watched her try 3 different combinations. My birthday, Daniel's birthday, Harold's birthday. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not idle curiosity. This was not a moment of weakness. This was reconnaissance. This was a plan. She was testing my defenses, and I had been failing the test. I sat in my car for a long time, the grainy footage of Tessa at my safe playing over and over on the tablet screen. The shame was suffocating. Not just shame for what she was doing, but shame that my son, my Daniel, was either blind to it or, worse, complicit. I felt utterly, devastatingly alone. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my next-door neighbor, Ruth Delgado, was struggling with her recycling bin. Ruth is 72, a retired nurse with a spine of steel and a garden that could win awards. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Eleanor," she called out, shoving a cardboard box flat with a grunt. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. "Just a long day." "Ruth, a long day or a long-term problem?" She dusted off her hands and walked over to my fence. "I see them. The way she looks at your house. The way your son walks 3 steps behind her like a beaten dog." The words were so blunt, so true. They cracked open the polite facade I had been maintaining. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to see it. She was in my room. Ruth. Going through my things? Ruth just nodded, her expression grim. Of course she was. Mine was my son-in-law. His name was Robert. He complimented my cooking for 6 months while he opened 3 credit cards in my name. By the time I found out, he'd tanked my credit and borrowed my emergency fund for a can't-miss investment. I stared at her. "What did you do?" "I did what you're going to do," she said, her voice hardening. "I stopped being a nice old lady and I became a general. You need to understand 3 rules. They are the only rules that matter now." She held up one finger. "First, document everything, every snide comment, every receipt she forgets on the counter, every time she's in a room she shouldn't be. Write it down with the date and the time." A second finger. "Second, isolate your assets. Lock down your access. They are in your house, which means they are in your life. You need to build a firewall between your money and their hands, immediately." A third finger. "And third, prepare for war, because that's what this is. A war for your future. And you do not fight it alone." She disappeared into her house for a moment and returned with a small, crisp business card. She pressed it into my hand. "Marcus Hale, Hale and Rowe. He specializes in elder law and civil litigation, which is a polite way of saying he evicts parasitic relatives. He's expensive, he's ruthless, and he saved my life. Call him." That night, I sat in the dark living room, the house silent. Daniel and Tessa were asleep in the guest room. I held the card in my hand, the embossed letters stark under the moonlight. Making this call felt like a betrayal. It felt like admitting that I had failed as a mother, that my son was a man I needed to be defended from. At midnight, I picked up my phone. My hand was shaking. I dialed the number. A voice answered on the second ring, not sleepy, but alert and sharp. Marcus Hale. Mr. Hale. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. My neighbor, Ruth Delgado, gave me your number. I'm sorry to call so late. Ruth's friends can call any time. I'm assuming this isn't a social call. Talk to me. Eleanor. And I did. For 1 solid hour, the words poured out of me. The 2-month stay, the redecorating, the comments about my cooking, the inheritance talk, the bank statements, and finally, the video. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finally finished, there was a long pause. Well, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. You're not lonely or suspicious, Mrs. Whitmore. You are being actively and systematically targeted. Hearing it said aloud by a professional, a stranger, was like a splash of ice water. The shame I felt began to morph, solidifying into a cold, hard anger. Here is what you are going to do, he instructed. You will buy a new paper notebook tomorrow. In it, you will log every single incident, just as Ruth said. You will save every text message. You will back up that video footage to a USB drive, and you will give that drive to Ruth or put it in a safe deposit box, not in the house. You will also start recording audio on your phone whenever you are in a room with them. Check our state laws. Yes, Oregon is a one-party consent state. You are the one party. Do it. What about getting them out? I whispered. I am preparing a formal notice of termination of tenancy, he said. They are guests without a contract, and their 2 months are long past. We will serve it when the moment is right, but not yet. Why not? Because, Eleanor, you have a choice. You can simply make them leave, and they will go on to the next victim. Or you can wait for them to make a mistake so significant that you end this permanently. You have the leverage. We just need them to use it against themselves. He paused, and his voice softened just a fraction. And one more thing. Being a mother does not mean being a victim. Your only obligation right now is to protect what Harold left you. Understood? Yes, I said. My voice was no longer shaking. Understood. We hung up. The next morning, I saw Ruth by the fence again. I just nodded. She nodded back. One last thing, dear. She called over. When they get desperate, they will get sloppy. They will make a mistake. Be ready for it. I went to the store that afternoon. I did not buy organic kale. I bought a black and white composition notebook, 3 high-capacity USB drives, and a small digital audio recorder. The shame was gone. In its place was a sharp, focused, and ice-cold discipline. My first act of war was silent. It was fought not with words, but with keystrokes. That night, after my call with Marcus, I sat at my desk in the study with the door firmly locked and began to build my digital firewall. I changed every single password I had, my primary email, my online banking, my retirement portfolio, my utility bills, even the library login. I replaced my simple, memorable phrases with long, chaotic strings of letters, numbers, and symbols that I had to write down in my new evidence notebook. For every account that offered it, I enabled 2-factor authentication, my phone, which Tessa and Daniel barely glanced at, dismissing it as an old person's device, became my new fortress gate. No one could get into my digital life without a physical key that I, and I alone, possessed. The next morning, I made my most important call. I walked out to the garden, ostensibly to weed the roses, and dialed North Summit Savings, the bank Harold and I had used for 40 years. I asked for the branch manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had known Harold personally. "Mr. Henderson," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. "I need to place a new security protocol on all of my accounts, effective immediately. I want a verbal password, I'll give it to you now, and I want a note on my file that no changes, absolutely no changes, to beneficiaries, wire transfers, or contact information can be made unless I am physically present in your office with my driver's license. No exceptions." He was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor, is everything all right? This is a significant lockdown." "Everything is perfectly fine, Mr. Henderson. I'm just getting my affairs in order, and I believe in being thorough." "Of course," he said, his voice turning professional. The verbal password was set. The fortress was built. I did not have to wait long. It happened 5 days later. The sloppiness Ruth had predicted arrived right on schedule. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read a cookbook. Tessa was at the island, scrolling on her laptop, sighing dramatically every few minutes about the poor job market. My phone, sitting on the counter, buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but the area code was local. "Hello, this is Eleanor Whitmore." "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Carol from the verification department at North Summit Savings. I'm calling in reference to your request from this morning." I kept my eyes on the cookbook. "I'm sorry, I haven't made any requests this morning." "Oh." Carol sounded momentarily confused. "We received a secure message from your linked email account, submitted through our online portal about an hour ago. The request was to update the primary beneficiary on your main investment account. Number ending in 4280. My heart, which I thought was cold iron, gave a painful thud. That was my largest account, my entire future. "Who was the request to change it to?" I asked, my voice as mild as if I were asking for the weather. The new beneficiary was listed as Tessa Quinn, spelled Tessaquinn, relationship listed as daughter-in-law. Across the island. Tessa clicked her mouse, oblivious. She was so close. She was breathing my air while trying to steal the rest of my life. "Carol," I said, "I did not authorize that request. I am looking at my email right now, and I see no such sent message. That is a fraudulent request." "I see," Carol said. Her voice was now sharp. All business. "Thank you for confirming, Mrs. Whitmore. The request was already flagged due to the in-person verification note Mr. Henderson placed. We have denied the change. The attempt has been logged." "One more thing. Carol, can you see where the online portal was accessed from?" "Yes. The IP address for the login that submitted the request traces back to your home internet service provider. It came from a device inside your house." "Thank you, Carol. You have been very helpful." I hung up. That evening, I logged into my account from my locked study. I pulled the full login history. There it was. An unrecognized device, a Tessa's MacBook Pro, had logged in at 9:07 in the morning, the same time I had been in the shower. She must have guessed my old, simple password. But she had been one day too late. My new password had locked her out, so she had tried to do it from my email. which she must have accessed before I changed that password too. I printed the login history. I printed the email confirmation from the bank, noting the fraudulent attempt. I slipped them into a thick manila folder, which I then put into a large envelope. I called Marcus Hale. "It happened," I said. "She tried to change my beneficiary. And the bank stopped it." "Yes, and I have the login records. It was her laptop, from inside my house." I heard him exhale slowly. "That's it. Eleanor, that is no longer just rude behavior. That is attempted financial fraud. That is a crime." I looked at the growing stack of evidence on my desk, the notebook, the USB drive with the safe video, and now, the bank records. It was a thick, heavy file. "So I call the police?" I asked. "I have her arrested." "You could," Marcus said. "But a criminal case can be slow and messy, and it gives them a platform to play the victim, to accuse you of being senile. No, we are not aiming for a messy skirmish. We are aiming for a clean, decisive, civil victory. We use this evidence not to put her in jail tomorrow, but to ensure they have zero grounds to fight you. We are preparing a checkmate. Eleanor. Not just a warning shot." I understood. This was not about revenge, not entirely. It was about removal. It was about a final, non-negotiable end. I would not give them the dignity of a fight. I would simply present the facts. The finishing blow, as he called it. I began a new routine. I started going to bed early. Or rather, I started pretending to go to bed early. At exactly 9:30 every night. I would turn off my bedside lamp, say goodnight, and leave my bedroom door open just a crack. The small digital audio recorder sat on my nightstand, plugged into the wall, ostensibly charging. It was, however, actively recording every sound that passed my doorway. I did not have to wait long. It happened 3 nights after I implemented the new protocol. It was just past 11 o'clock. They must have been certain I was fast asleep. Their voices were low, urgent, and vibrating with a tension that carried easily down the hall. They were arguing in the vicious whispers of people who believe they are safe. "I just don't know what else you expect me to do." "Daniel?" Tessa's whisper was sharp, like tearing silk. "It's not my fault the interest rates went up. The card companies are predators. They trapped me." $61,000. Tessa. Daniel's voice was weak, barely audible. 61,000. You told me it was 20, maybe 25. How did it get that high? And the car, you said the Lexus was almost paid off. It is handled. Or it will be. If you just stop being weak and stick to the plan. It's a temporary liquidity problem, that's all. This isn't a liquidity problem. This is a disaster. We can't climb out from under this. We don't have to, she hissed. That's the entire point of being here. The solution is right down the hall. Sleeping. There was a heavy silence. I could hear the sound of Daniel pacing, the soft scuff of his slippers on the hardwood floor. Asking her to sign the house over. It feels wrong. Tess. It's her home. Wrong? Her voice was incredulous. What's wrong about it? It's your house. It's your inheritance. We are just accessing it a little early. We need this. Daniel. We sell the house. We pay off the 61,000 in one clean check. We use the rest, and there will be a lot left over for a down payment on our own place. In a better neighborhood. A fresh start. No debt. She'll never agree to it. She's not just going to give me the house to sell. Of course she won't. Not if you ask like a little boy, she snapped. You have to use the levers, the ones we talked about. We're a team. Remember, I could almost hear the false, coaxing smile in her voice. We use the psychological angle. You are her only son. You are her future. She's an old woman. She's in this big, empty house, all alone. It's her duty as a mother to protect her son's future. You just have to make her see that. You make her see that helping you is her only real purpose now. You make her feel guilty for holding on to it when her only child is suffering. I can't guilt her like that. A sharp, frustrated sound from Tessa. My God. Daniel? Why are you being so soft? It's just a house. It's just paper. Look at her. She's 68 years old. She barely leaves the living room. Then came the words that I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. She's dying anyway, Tessa hissed, her voice dropping to a flat, cold monotone. She's probably got a few good years left. Tops. What does she even need the house for? It's a waste. She should be happy to give it to us. She's just being selfish. I did not breathe. I lay perfectly still under my quilt. I felt the blood stop in my veins. It was not anger, not sadness. It was a profound, glacial cold. A realization that the woman sleeping in my guest room, eating my food, was not just greedy. She was empty. She was waiting for me to die. And my son, my only child, was standing in the hallway, listening to this. He didn't even argue. He just sighed. A long, weary sound of capitulation. Something inside me clicked. It was the sound of the last, frayed thread of maternal delusion snapping. I was no longer a mother defending her home. I was a target who had just been handed the enemy's complete battle plan. I realized then that my silent, defensive war was not enough. Locking drawers, changing passwords that was the strategy of a victim. They were right about one thing. It was time to be proactive. But not with guilt, with consequences. I would no longer try to block their moves. I would set a trap, a public one, and I would let them walk right into it. I lay awake until 4 a.m, listening to the house settle. The next day, I emailed Marcus. I transcribed the entire conversation. I told him I was finished hiding. I wanted a new plan, an offensive one. His reply was immediate. He approved. The sequence was simple, elegant in its brutality. First, the bait. We would use the credit card. I would report my primary card, the one Daniel and Tessa knew I used for everything, as lost. The bank would issue a new one, but the old number would be flagged. Second, the opportunity. I would accidentally leave my old, lost wallet on the kitchen counter. Third, the alert. The moment Tessa used the card, and Marcus was certain she would, her greed and desperation were too high, it would be declined, and the bank would send an immediate fraud alert to my phone and email. Fourth, the appointment. I would schedule Marcus and, as he suggested, 2 uniformed officers to ensure a peaceful transition of tenancy. For a specific time after the trap was sprung, I did exactly as he said. I reported the card lost. I received the alert that the old one was deactivated. I placed my wallet on the counter. And then, I sat in the living room, picked up my knitting, and I waited. I was perfectly calm. The cold in my chest had become a kind of strength. I was no longer a mother. I was a survivor. And I was waiting. The call to North Summit Savings was precise. I spoke to Mr. Henderson again. I seem to have misplaced my primary credit card, I told him. A perfect performance of mild, elderly confusion. I'm sure it's just in the house somewhere, but Harold was always so cautious. I'd like to report it lost and have a new one issued. Of course. Eleanor, I'll deactivate it immediately. Thank you, I said. And Mr. Henderson, just in case someone does find it before I do, please ensure that any and all attempted transactions on that old card number, no matter how small, are automatically declined. And I'd like an immediate text alert for each attempt, just for my peace of mind. He agreed. The trap was set. That afternoon, while Tessa was in the shower, I took my old brown leather wallet, the one she had seen me use 100 times, and placed it on the kitchen counter. It was right next to the mail, partially tucked under a supermarket flyer. It was a picture of casual forgetfulness, a simple, careless mistake. From the small, motion-activated camera I'd hidden on the kitchen bookshelf, the one I'd ostensibly installed to watch the cleaning crew, I had a perfect view. It didn't take an hour. The footage was chilling in its mundanity. Tessa came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel. She walked into the kitchen, heading for the refrigerator. She stopped. She saw the wallet. She looked toward the living room, where I was pretending to knit. She looked up the stairs. Then, her movements quick and furtive, she picked it up. She didn't open it. She simply slipped her phone from her robe pocket, laid the card on the counter, and photographed the front. Then she flipped it, photographed the back. She slipped the card back into the wallet and placed the wallet exactly as she had found it. The entire operation took less than 30 seconds. I waited. 2 full days passed. It was a quiet, suffocating 2 days. Tessa was almost pathologically cheerful. She made smoothies. She asked if I needed anything from the store. She was waiting for the right moment to use the numbers she had stolen. A moment when I wouldn't be looking at my accounts. It came on a Friday afternoon, just after 2 o'clock. I was in the living room, reading. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a text message. Fraud alert, North Summit Savings. A charge of $1,240 at Ridge and Row Boutique has been declined. Ridge and Row, one of the most expensive clothing stores in town. She wasn't even trying to be subtle. She was trying to buy the blazer she had mentioned before, and probably several other essentials. The amount was staggering. It was a new level of arrogance. I set the phone down. I continued to read my book. Or, at least, I stared at the page. 90 seconds later, my phone rang. Tessa's name flashed on the screen. She was calling me from the store. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Tessa. I silenced it, letting the call vibrate itself to death on the mahogany. I could feel the panic radiating from the phone. The humiliation she was feeling was real, but it was not the kind she would later describe. It was the humiliation of a thief being caught. A full minute passed. The third call. This time, I answered. I pressed the speakerphone button, just as Daniel walked in the front door from work early. He stopped, seeing the look on my face. Eleanor, is that you? Her voice was a high-pitched shriek, tinny and laced with genuine fury. Hello. Tessa, is something wrong? Something wrong. Your card. You blocked your card. I'm standing here at the register at Ridge and Row, and they just declined it. The cashier, the manager, everyone is staring at me. You did this. You blocked it. Daniel? standing in the foyer, looked at me, his face a mask of confusion and dawning anger. "Mum, what is she talking about?" I looked at my son, then spoke clearly to the phone. "No, Tessa. I didn't block the card." "Don't lie to me. They said it was blocked by the bank. You did this to shame me." "I reported that card lost," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the tea I had been planning to make. "I reported it lost 2 days ago, after I misplaced my wallet. They must have just deactivated the old number." A strangled sound came from the phone. A gasp, a sob, a hiccup of pure, unadulterated rage. She was processing my words. She was realizing the trap. You. I've never been so embarrassed in my life," she wailed, the performance snapping back into place. The security guard, he looked at me. "How could you do this to me?" I let her cry for a few seconds. Daniel was taking a step toward me, his hand out, ready to take the phone, to defend his wife, to attack his mother. "I only have one question." "Tessa," I said, cutting through her sobs. "Why are you at a boutique, and who gave you permission to use my card?" The line went utterly, completely silent. Daniel froze. We all heard the click as she hung up. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was 4:15. My next appointment was in 15 minutes. I turned to my son, who was just opening his mouth, his face turning red. "Daniel, sit down." "Don't tell me to sit down." "What did you do?" I said. "Sit down. My lawyer is arriving in 15 minutes, and he's bringing guests." I walked into the kitchen, leaving him standing in the living room. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove to boil. I went into my study, retrieved the thick, heavy manila folder, the one containing the notebook, the USB drive, and the printed bank records, and placed it squarely in the center of the coffee table. I went back to the kitchen, found my best tin of Earl Grey, and calmly began to brew a fresh pot of tea. The wait was over. We were back. The 6 months had collapsed into this single, frozen moment in my living room. Daniel was still standing by the foyer, his face the color of wet cement. The speakerphone on the coffee table was a dead, silent square. Marcus Hale stepped fully inside, his polished shoes silent on the hardwood floor. He was followed by Officer Bennett, a tall, broad man who looked like he'd seen everything, and Officer Ruiz, a younger, sharper officer whose gaze swept the room once and seemed to itemize every object. "Please, come in. Have a seat," I said. My voice was the calmest in the room. I gestured to the sofa. The kettle in the kitchen began to whistle, a high, piercing shriek. I did not move to quiet it. "Mum, what is this?" Daniel finally managed to say, his voice cracking. "You called the police? You called the police on Tessa?" "On me." "Your mother did not call them, Daniel," Marcus Hale said. He placed his briefcase on the coffee table next to the thick manila folder I had left there. "I did. It is standard procedure, just to ensure a peaceful transition of tenancy. We are here to serve a legal notice." Just as he spoke, the front door, which Daniel had left open, burst inward. It was Tessa. She must have broken every speed limit driving back from the boutique. Her face was a ruin of smeared makeup and furious tears, her hair wild. She stopped dead when she saw the 2 uniformed officers. "What?" she screamed, looking from the police to me. "What is this? What lies did you tell them? Are you insane? You're trying to have me arrested." "Ms. Quinn?" Officer Bennett said, his voice a deep, flat rumble. Please lower your voice. We're here to— I will not. She is a sick, vindictive old woman. She's senile. She's having a breakdown because I used her card. She's trying to destroy me. Tessa, I said. My voice cut straight through her hysteria, and the room fell silent again, save for the screaming kettle. I picked up my laptop from the side table. I believe this belongs to you. I turned the screen to face her and Daniel. I pressed the play button. The silent, grainy footage filled the screen. Tessa, in my bedroom. Tessa, in her robe. Tessa, lifting the painting of the Oregon coast. Tessa, her red-nailed fingers running over the combination dial of my safe. Tessa, pulling on the handle, her brow furrowed in concentration. Daniel made a small, strangled noise, like he'd been punched in the gut. Tessa's face went from blotchy red to a stark, bloodless white. What is that? She stammered. You were filming me in your bedroom. You spied on me. That's illegal. You're disgusting. You're a sick old woman. It is my house, Tessa, I said calmly, and that is my private safe. I closed the laptop. Marcus Hale spoke, his voice crisp and professional. Spying, as you call it, Ms. Quinn, can indeed be illegal. However, a homeowner recording events within their own private space to document repeated unauthorized entry and attempted theft is not. It is called evidence. He tapped the manila folder I had set out. Which brings us to the rest of the file. He didn't need to open it. He addressed Daniel, but his words were aimed at Tessa. We have the bank records from North Summit Savings, dated 2 weeks ago. They document a fraudulent online request to change the primary beneficiary on Mrs. Whitmore's investment accounts. The request was to change the name to Tessa Quinn. Daniel finally looked at his wife. Tessa beneficiary. I don't know what he's talking about. She lied, her voice too high. He's making it up. We also have, Marcus continued, the IP address logs for that request, which trace back to a device identified as Tessa's MacBook Pro, originating from this physical address. We have the printout of the declined transaction from 45 minutes ago for $1,240 at Ridge and Row Boutique, using a card number that Mrs. Whitmore had already reported lost. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. And we have the audio recording of you in the hallway 3 nights ago, discussing your $61,000 debt and your plan to psychologically pressure Eleanor into signing over this house so you could sell it. Daniel Whitmore collapsed into the armchair. He didn't just sit. He folded. He put his head in his hands. Tessa's facade of a tearful victim evaporated. The heat that replaced it was terrifying. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. You set me up. You old bitch. You planned all of this. You set me up. I set a boundary. I corrected her, my voice still quiet. You chose to cross it. Officer Bennett, who had been watching all of this with a practiced neutrality, finally spoke. He looked at Daniel. Mr. Whitmore, is there a rental agreement or a lease for your tenancy in this house? Daniel didn't look up. His voice was muffled by his hands. No, sir. We're family. We were just staying here for a little while. I see. Officer Bennett nodded. Marcus Hale opened his briefcase and retrieved a single, immaculately white document. He placed it on the coffee table in front of Daniel's bowed head. This is a formal, legal notice of termination of tenancy at will, Marcus said. It states that your occupancy of this residence is no longer permitted by the owner, Eleanor Whitmore. I need Mrs. Whitmore to sign this in the presence of the officers. He held out a heavy, silver pen to me. I took it. I looked at my son, who was a broken stranger in my living room. I signed my name on the line. My hand was perfectly steady. As you have no lease and have provided no rent, Marcus continued, the state requires that you be given 24 hours to vacate the premises. You will remove yourselves and all your belongings by 4:30 p.m. tomorrow. You can't, Tessa shrieked, lunging toward the table. We have rights. This is Daniel's house. Tell them. Daniel, tell them. Officer Ruiz moved, not quickly, but decisively, stepping between Tessa and the table. Ms. Quinn, I would strongly advise you to be quiet and cooperate. She looked at both of them, her expression clear. Your mother-in-law is being extremely generous. Based on the evidence Mr. Hale has presented, she has more than sufficient grounds to pursue multiple felony criminal charges. Attempted financial fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft. Right now, Tessa froze. But she has not, Officer Bennett added. She is offering you an alternative. You walk away, you take your things, and you are gone in 24 hours. If you are not, we will be back to remove you for trespassing. And at that point, I imagine Mr. Hale will be filing those criminal charges. Do you understand? Daniel gave a short, sharp nod, a gesture of complete and total surrender. He wouldn't look at me. He only looked at the floor, a man who had just lost everything because he had tried to take it. As soon as Marcus Hale and the officers left, the screaming kettle in the kitchen was the only sound. I walked over and calmly turned off the burner. The ensuing silence was heavier, more charged than any of the shouting that had come before. It lasted for perhaps 30 seconds. Then, the alliance that had formed to destroy me shattered. You, Daniel whispered, his voice shaking with a new, unfamiliar venom. He was still in the armchair, but he had lifted his head to stare at his wife. You did this. You lied to me. $61,000. Don't you dare! Tessa snarled, her voice a low, gravelly rasp. The tears were gone, replaced by a pure, reptilian fury. Don't you dare put this on me. I did this for us. While you were too weak to even ask your mother for a loan, you were happy to live off her, happy to let me handle the unpleasant parts. Handle them. You were trying to steal from her. You photographed her card. You tried to change her beneficiary. You told me she was just confused, that she was imagining things. She is confused, Tessa shrieked, all pretense of control gone. She's a senile old woman who just got lucky and you're a pathetic coward. Oh, I can't. Tess, it feels wrong. Grow up, Daniel. This is how the world works. We were going to be set for life, and you just let her walk all over you. You let her win. Get out, he whispered. Get your things. Get out. Oh, I'm getting my things. We are both getting our things. Daniel? Because you are just as homeless as I am. Good luck explaining this to your firm. They stared at each other for a long moment, two shipwreck survivors realizing they had drowned each other. Then, the frantic, ugly noise of their departure began. I sat in my armchair, the one Harold had always preferred, and I listened. I listened to the slamming of the guest room door. I listened to the scrape of suitcases being dragged from the closet. I listened to the muffled, furious sobs from Tessa and the low, agonized curses from Daniel. An hour later, there was a soft knock on my front door. It was Ruth Delgado. She wasn't holding a business card this time. She was holding a large casserole dish, wrapped in a towel. It was lasagna. "Figured you might not feel like cooking," she said, bustling past me into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. She didn't ask what was going on. She didn't pry. She just put the casserole on the counter, took a long look at my face, and then came and sat in the armchair opposite me. She didn't say a word. She just sat. A silent, steady presence that anchored me to the room. The packing continued all night. The angry, percussive sound of drawers being yanked open and slammed shut. The high, violent rip of packing tape being pulled from a roll. The heavy, defeated thud of boxes being dropped in the hallway. Once, Daniel came downstairs. He looked 20 years older. "Mum," he started, his voice thick. "Please, we can pay you back. The 61,000. I'll get a second job. Just don't do this." I looked at him. My son. This stranger who had stood by while his wife plotted to gut my life. "You asked me for 2 months. Daniel. 2 months. Tops. That was 5 months ago." My voice was not angry. It was just tired. 5 months was more than enough time for a temporary stay. He flinched, as if I had struck him. He turned and went back upstairs. The next day, the deadline loomed. 4:30. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, as they were still dragging bags onto the lawn, a police car, as promised, pulled up to the curb. Officers Bennett and Ruiz stepped out. They did not approach the house. They simply stood by their vehicle, a silent, official reminder that time was up. At 5:45, the car was loaded. It was sagging on its axles. Every inch of space crammed with bags, boxes, and the wilted orchid. Tessa came out of the house last. She did not look at Daniel. She did not look at the police. She looked at me, standing in the frame of my own front door. Her eyes were not hateful. They were not furious. They were utterly, terrifyingly empty. It was the face of a person who had gambled everything and lost, and who was already calculating her next move, in another town, with another victim. She got into the passenger seat and did not look back. Daniel stood on the walkway, holding his car keys. He looked at the house he grew up in. He looked at me. "Mum," he whispered, his face crumbling. "Just one more chance, please. I didn't know. I didn't know how bad it was. She lied to me." "It wasn't the lies you believed, Daniel," I said, my voice soft but final. "It was the truths you were willing to ignore." He waited, desperate for a different answer. "Go, Daniel," I said. "And maybe, when you finally understand what respect is, you can try calling me. But not today, and not tomorrow." He stood there for another second. Then he turned, got into the driver's seat, and pulled away from the curb. I watched the car until it turned the corner at the end of the street and disappeared. I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy oak door. I heard the lock click into place. The house fell into silence. It was not the heavy, oppressive quiet of the last 5 months. It was a clean silence, an empty silence. It was my silence. I walked to the living room window, the one where I had been sitting with my tea just yesterday. I stood there, looking out at the empty curb. I did not cry. I simply let out a long, slow breath that I felt I had been holding for my entire life. I thought the silence that fell over my house when they drove away was the end. It was not. It was only the intermission. My phone rang the next morning at precisely 8 a.m. It was Marcus. His voice was no longer just professional. It was sharp, energized, like a hunter who has spotted his prey. "Eleanor," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "They didn't just leave. They escalated." "What do you mean they're gone?" "They are gone, but they were busy last night. I just received a call from a mobile notary service here in Cedar Ridge. They received an urgent, high-priority request just before midnight. It was for a durable power of attorney to be signed by Eleanor Whitmore, granting full and total control of all her assets and properties to her son, Daniel Whitmore. The document was already filled out. They just needed your signature and a notary stamp. A cold I hadn't felt yesterday washed over me. They hadn't fled. They had regrouped. Did she sign it?" "She tried," Marcus said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "They attempted to forge your signature on the preliminary documents, but the notary, a very sharp woman, became suspicious. The signature didn't match your file, and the urgency was a red flag. She insisted on a live video call to verify your ID. Tessa, apparently, tried to block the camera, saying you were too ill to be on screen. The notary refused the service, hung up, and then did something brilliant. She saw my name listed as your attorney of record on a previous filing, and she called me directly, first thing this morning. So, they failed," I breathed, sagging against the kitchen counter. "Oh, it didn't fail. Eleanor," Marcus said. "It's the final move. They just moved from covert fraud to overt, clumsy forgery. They are desperate. The notary, at my request, has agreed to play along. She called them back 30 minutes ago, apologized, and blamed a bad internet connection. She has scheduled an in-person meeting to finalize the paperwork today at 10:30 at the Corner Brew Cafe. Officer Ruiz and I will be waiting." The cafe was warm, smelling of dark roast and pastries. I sat in a booth in the far back corner, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. Marcus sat across from me, his briefcase on the seat beside him. Officer Ruiz, now in plain clothes, sat at the counter, calmly reading a newspaper. At 10:32, the bell above the door jingled. They walked in. Daniel looked like a ghost. He was pale, unshaven, and his eyes were hollow. But Tessa was a woman transformed. The victim was gone. She was dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit, her hair pulled into a severe bun. She radiated a furious, manic energy. She was holding a thick document. She was not alone. She had another woman with her, someone I did not recognize. Tessa saw me. Her face hardened. She marched to our booth, Daniel and the strange woman trailing in her wake. "Mom," Daniel started, his voice a dry croak. "Please, just listen. Be quiet. Daniel." Tessa snapped. She slapped the sheaf of papers onto the table. "Eleanor, we are done playing these stupid, senile games. This is a formality. You are going to sign this power of attorney. It's Daniel's inheritance anyway. This just makes the eventual sale of the house cleaner for him. The notary will be here any minute." "And who is this?" I asked, nodding to the stranger. "This is my friend," Tessa said. "She's our witness. To make sure you don't try to lie and say you were confused." Daniel put his hand on the papers, his fingers trembling. "Tess," he whispered. "This feels wrong. Let's just go." We are not going anywhere, she hissed, pushing the papers toward me. It is just a formality. Daniel, tell her. That word. Formality. Marcus Hale slid out of the booth and stood up. He was not a tall man, but he suddenly seemed to command the entire room. Tessa startled, clearly not having recognized him. Who are you? This is a private family matter. I am Mrs. Whitmore's attorney, Ms. Quinn. We spoke yesterday. His voice was as cold and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. And I am here to inform you that the document you are holding is utterly worthless. It's a standard, ironclad, durable power of attorney. She shot back. Once she signs it, it's legal. She could sign it 1,000 times, Marcus said, and it would not grant you access to a single penny, because as of 2 weeks ago, Eleanor Whitmore, as an individual, technically owns nothing. All of her assets, this house, her investments, her bank accounts, everything were irrevocably transferred into the Whitmore Living Trust. He looked at the papers she was clutching. That document is attempting to grant power over assets she does not personally control. It is an illegal infringement on the trust. It is null, void, and, most importantly, it is the final piece of evidence of your conspiracy to defraud. Tessa's face, which had been tight with aggression, simply crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks. Officer Ruiz set her newspaper down and walked over. She unclipped her badge from her belt and held it up. Ms. Quinn, I'm Officer Ruiz. We met at the house. Based on the evidence collected yesterday, combined with this morning's complaint from the notary service regarding attempted forgery, I am placing you under formal investigation for felony fraud and conspiracy. Daniel snatched his hand back from the papers as if they were burning. He stared at his wife, his eyes wide with a final, dawning, absolute horror. You told me, he stammered, looking at the papers, at Tessa, at the officer. You told me it was just a formality. Tessa did not look at him. She did not look at the officer. She looked at me. Her face was no longer empty. It was filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. I looked back at her. I did not move. I did not raise my voice. There is no formality, Tessa, I said. That can erase my boundaries. Officer Ruiz took Tessa's arm. Ma'am, you need to come with me. Tessa did not resist. She just stared at me as Ruiz pulled her arm behind her back. I did not watch her be led away. I just listened. In the quiet of the cafe, over the sound of the espresso machine, I heard the sharp, definitive, metallic click of the handcuffs as they locked into place. I did not say another word. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and give this video a like. And please, support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.